The paradox of fiction, sometimes called the paradox of emotional response to fiction. What is it? In this video, what I want to do is describe what the paradox is supposed to be and leave you with some names of philosophers that have talked about the paradox or supposed paradox of fiction. Let's get started. Paradox of fiction. Paradox of emotional responses to fiction. Let's break down both of those. First of all, we need to know what a paradox is. Second of all, we need to know what we're talking about when we say fiction. A paradox is when you have two statements. It could also be 3 or 4 or 5, more than 2, at least 2 statements that contradict each other. You have at least 2 ideas that when you put them together, they seem to prove that the other one's wrong, but separately, they make perfect sense. The paradox of fiction is when you have 3 ideas that each one by themselves makes perfect sense, but when you put them all together, that's when you have a problem. It'll be called the paradox of fiction. We'll get there. Fiction, what's that? It's when something is a lie, or at least not true. Anytime you're watching a movie that's not historically accurate, it's a fictional movie. Lots of movies and books and songs and poetry and art in general is of things that are not exactly accurate. They are instead fiction. Maybe you want to call it a lie for the sake of art. Maybe you want to call it at least not true. Fictional as opposed to non-fictional. Fictional means not true. So the paradox of fiction has to do with 2 or more statements that when you put them together, there seems to be a problem. And the statements have to do with things that are not true. Let's look at the actual statements in the paradox of fiction. Here are 3 propositions, 3 statements, which can be true or false. Let's read the first one together. People do not believe in the existence of fictional characters. Think of the book, Harry Potter. There was also a movie, Harry Potter. Do you actually believe that there's a real person in real life called Harry Potter? No, you don't. Superman? It's a comic. It's in art. But you don't actually believe that there's Captain Underpants. In fiction, there's all these situations, there's all these characters, and we don't actually believe that they're real, right? Okay, so that seems fair. Let's move on to number 2. People rationally experience emotions towards fictional situations. When Harry Potter is being attacked by Voldemort, don't you feel pity or sad or angry or like there's an injustice? Or when Lois Lane is rejecting Clark Kent, don't you feel bad for Superman? We do feel emotions when we're reading books. When it's a really, really sad book, we might cry. Or if there's a really, really sad song, we might cry. Or if there's a really, really scary movie, we might scream. Right? Okay, so that seems to make sense. Look at proposition 3. To be emotionally moved, people must believe the situation. Doesn't that make sense? If you didn't believe something was frightening, why would you be scared? If you didn't believe that something was sad, why would you feel sad? If you didn't feel like something good was happening, why would you, because of that, feel joy or happiness? Okay, so that makes sense too. This is why it's a paradox. It's a paradox because by themselves, each of these 3 propositions seem to make sense. Like, yeah, in order for you to feel sad, something needs to be sad. You need to actually think something's sad to feel sad. And when you see a sad painting, or you hear a sad song, or you read a sad book, or you're watching a sad show, you feel sad. Like you actually have an experience of those emotions. And thirdly, we don't believe that they're real. So those movies, those books, those comics, those paintings, those songs, we don't believe that they're real. We feel real emotions, and we wouldn't feel real emotions if we didn't believe that they were real. This is the paradox of fiction, the paradox of your emotional response to fiction. Let me put things in a different way. Here's the problem in more common terms. Our emotional responses to fiction, things that are not true, match our emotional responses to what is true, to reality. There's this really big similarity between how we feel in response to something fake that's sad and how we feel in response to something real that's sad. And that similarity should not take place, but it does. And I end with just mentioning some people who have written about this supposed or real paradox.